clock tower. Little tear gas cleared the whole place out. I'll be back with the hazmat for the next round. We was trying to protest and the fires broke out. Look out for the secret agents, they be planted in the crowd. Said it's civil unrest, but you sleep so sound like you don't hear the screams when we catching beat down. Staying quiet when they killing, but you speak loud when we ride. Got opinions coming from a place of privilege. Sicker than the COVID, how they did them on the ground. Speaking of the COVID, is it still going around? Won't you tell me about the looting? What's that really all about? Cause they throw away black lives like paper towels plus unemployment rate. What, 40 million now? Killed a man in broad day. Might never see a trial. We just wanna break chains like slaves in the south. Started in the north end, but we in the downtown. Riot cops try to block, now we got a showdown. Down.
KBLA Talk 1580. So glad you are here with us, and you are always invited into the conversation at 800-920-1580. 800-920-1580. We are here for each other and with each other, and I'm really excited this week to welcome in another voice that I haven't had a chance to speak with before. She's got a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. Over 15 years of analytical research experience, and she is the Senior Regulatory Specialist and Director of Product Labeling and Ingredient Review at Registrar Corporation. Anna Benevente, welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. There's a lot of confusing stuff happening in the world right now, and I guess we're trying to figure out how to navigate it. You know, as a mom, we we think a lot about how to keep our kids safe, right? And I mean, I guess that's where labeling and ingredients and sort of quality control of the products that we do have access to is really important. And so for me, I just kind of have this general worry as I see what seems to be chaos at the Food and Drug Administration and just the way that these changes are unrolling. It makes me wonder, how is that impacting what's on our shelves?
Right. Yeah. We share the same concerns. You know, just a little background on Registrar Corp. We're a consulting firm, and we help companies in the food and beverage, but also cosmetic, drug, and medical device industries be in compliance with FDA's requirements. And so, yeah, we're sitting back and watching the cuts being made to personnel in certain key departments. And so then we become very concerned about, you know, them having the manpower to properly enforce regulations. You know, there was a significant change to the law for food safety in 2011 under the Obama administration, the Food Safety Modernization Act, which radically improved the food safety requirements for companies that were going to be selling food and beverage in the United States. And so, you know, it's on the books, but you have to make sure that the personnel is there to enforce it and conduct inspections and things like that. So, you know, that's a big concern. You know, we're all just kind of sitting back and watching this and wondering, you know, what is the fallout going to be?
So your job is to help to make sure companies fit the guidelines and laws, the rules, to put their product on the market, whatever that might be.
Right. Yeah, we do research into, like, for example, my team specifically researches ingredients, whether or not they're permitted here, the labeling, you know, that goes on like a food package or a cosmetic or a drug package, helping companies make sure that when they're selling in the United States, whether it's a foreign or a domestic company, that they're in compliance with FDA's rules. So that's where our services are focused, yeah.
I mean, and even though we see recalls and sometimes things get into our food and or cosmetic supply chain that are problematic, we have enjoyed a pretty safe food supply in the United States for my whole lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do see, periodic recalls. You know, when you see things like sometimes there'll be a recall for a lot of times fresh fruits and vegetables because of E. coli or salmonella being found. But yeah, it's been strengthened certainly over the last 10 years. And so, our concern is that that's not going to be properly enforced if these dramatic cuts that are being made to FDA, continue. So I think that's something that not just businesses but consumers need to be concerned about, and should make their voices heard, to our local and state and federal representatives, so that we don't end up impacted in ways that can change our the safety of the food that we consume and our children consume. It's a really important matter.
Right, and it's not like that everywhere. I mean, not to, be touting American exceptionalism, but it's one of the things that we've done kind of pretty well is keep the food chain mostly safe. And so far, 10,000 mass firings at the Department of Health and Human Services, and we're looking at, a reorganization of the Food and Drug Administration. It seems like a 1-2 punch. I mean, it feels like they are related to each other. I remember in 2022 we had the emergency around infant formulas, right? When the infant formulas were being recalled and they were dangerous, and I just wonder, like, what happens if something like that occurs today?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it would be interesting to know if they made any cuts to that particular team that reviews infant formulas. It's a very tiny team. I think it's just a handful of people. And the regulations around infant formula were pretty strict, and there's a whole process that you have to go through, in essence, with clinical trials and growth studies to support that your infant formula will meet the dietary needs of an infant, since for many of them that's going to be the sole source of nutrition, right? And so then when they found, the adulterated infant formulas that had to be pulled from the shelves, all of a sudden, it was like panic stations because there isn't enough, because not enough companies make it. And so they put in what's called enforcement discretion, where they sort of waived the rules for a while and let certain companies that were marketing infant formulas overseas start to market here for a short time period, just to meet the demand. But it's when you do have cuts to resources, certainly it can impact all of us in ways that aren't always easily predictable. And that's an excellent example of when something like that happened. So, our hope is that the enforcement of, certainly food safety and the upcoming legislation isn't going to be impacted by these cuts, because I think it was about 3,500 of those HHS cuts were at FDA. That's a lot of people, and they have a big job to do. So, we're just kind of waiting to see what the fallout on this is going to be.
In the cosmetics field, I was talking about this yesterday. There's a study by Consumer Reports showing that the synthetic hair, for example, that many Black women use when we get braided styles, has now been found to have all these carcinogens in it, cancer-causing, materials, and lead, which you definitely don't want to put on your head.
No.
I mean, and I know, beyond the mom thing into the woman who uses cosmetics thing, this has been a real concern before changes, right? Before regulatory changes, that cosmetics are just not as well regulated as food, even though we might put them on our face, under our arms, and our, on our heads. How do you see this kind of, and that, of course, was discovered by Consumer Reports. But how do you see this kind of regulation or safety of cosmetic products faring in this environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting because for the longest time, the cosmetics was the Wild Wild West. There were very few laws that regulated them. FDA wasn't given the authority to actually impose safety requirements on them to speak of. I used to joke that I wasn't going to put anything in or on my body that didn't come out of the EU, because the EU and other markets like that have very strict requirements for cosmetics where you actually submit to those government agencies toxicological assessments of your cosmetics. You have to prove that the ingredients are safe for their intended use, and FDA simply didn't have the authority to demand that sort of notification from companies selling cosmetics. Now, the good news is that in 2022, they did pass MOCRA, which is a Modernization of Cosmetic Regulations Act. It drastically overhauled the law, and it does mandate, and it's in the phase-in, period right now, as all of these requirements are kind of coming on board. And again, another thing that we want to see FDA enforce, but it does require safety assessments. It puts burdens on the manufacturers as well as the brand labels themselves, like the Dior's of the world, to make sure that their ingredients are safe, that they have safety assessments to back up what's in the cosmetics. They're now required to register, and then they have to do what's called a listing of all their products. So there's more oversight coming on cosmetics in the U.S., so we're very, very hopeful. And again, but then back to the whole, issue of the layoffs at FDA, we want to make sure that, and we hope that proper enforcement of these regulations can still happen with that reduction in workforce. Yeah.
We're talking with Anna Benevente, and if you have questions or a conversation, 800-920-1580, looking at what's happening with the food safety, product labeling, ingredient review. She's a senior regulatory specialist and director of product labeling and ingredient review for Registrar Corp. What is this? Gives us a unique opportunity to look at some of the changes that are happening and how we can navigate them. I'm Dominique DiPrima for KBLA Talk 1580.
Say the quiet part out loud. KBLA Talk 1580. Before the fire, Altadena was a real-life Wakanda. A thriving black oasis just 50 miles from downtown Los Angeles. 80% black residents were homeowners, building intergenerational wealth against the odds. It was a hub of black-owned businesses, churches, and cultural institutions. It stood as a symbol of black resilience and economic independence. Then, in a matter of hours, it was gone. The fire tore through homes, swallowed businesses, and left behind a painful void. But was it just an unstoppable act of nature, or was negligence involved? Did officials ignore early warning signs? Were the response efforts delayed or insufficient? What role, if any, did corporate or government failures play? Survivors are demanding answers. Don't miss our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall. The Eden Altadena Fire, 100 days and counting, on Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center, 1081 North Fair Oaks in Pasadena. Join Dominique DiPrima, Nee Cordelai Corte, James Farr, Tavis Smiley, and a panel of survivors, community leaders, and experts as we commemorate Day 100 since the wildfires flared up. And we discuss where we go from here. It's KBLA's Eden Altadena Fire, 100 days and counting Town Hall, Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center in Pasadena. Light refreshments to follow. Admission is free, but sign-up is required at our KBLA1580.com website. The first 100 attendees will receive a complimentary air purifier. This is a community call to action, brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580 and Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Can your pad absorb everything and stay fresh? Always Radiant with Flex Foam can. Get up to 0 leaks, 0 odor, and 0 feel. Because Flex Foam is the only pad with a flexible foam core. You heard me, foam. Always Radiant is so thin, it feels like nothing, yet protects like nothing else. Can your pad do that? For up to 100% leak-free protection, try Always Radiant to see what Flex Foam can do for you.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
I thank you. I do appreciate you. You have no idea how happy I am you are here with me. It would not be the same waking up every morning to come in here at 6 without you to talk to. 800-920-1580. That's the number to call if you got something to say. We're talking with Anna Benevente, Senior Regulatory Specialist and Director of Product Labeling and Ingredient Review for Registrar Corporation. We have a couple questions in the conversation, the YouTube comments. We're streaming live right now, and of course, I have many more. B-Bell wants to know what labels are not required to be put on food that probably should be labeled, in your opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so the good thing about the regulations is that most foods are required to put that nutrition facts chart, that you see is pretty ubiquitous. It's like all over the place. It has within it the mandatory nutrients that FDA thinks it's really important for consumers to know. And so we all really should kind of think back to, health class and elementary school and, what did our teachers tell us back in the day about, good nutrition and healthy eating habits. And that nutrition facts panel is the primary way that you can do that. And actually a very interesting new development within the last, I guess it was maybe 2 months ago or so, before the change in administrations, they actually proposed what's called front of package labeling. And we're really hopeful that this will actually end up being finalized. And what it does is it's going to require companies to put on the front of the package the information on some of those, bad, unhealthy nutrients like added sugars and saturated fat, so that when you're going through the marketplace, your Target or wherever, you can quickly find the products that have the low levels of those bad nutrients. So that's kind of one ray of hope. Hopefully in the next year, we'll see that requirement come into place. As far as, foods that don't have to have that kind of labeling, it's pretty much limited to things like bottled water and coffee. So all of your unhealthy foods, generally speaking, are going to have that nutrition facts label. So, one of the best things a consumer can do when trying to, make sure that they're eating healthy is to look at that chart, take a look and see how much added sugars, how much fat and saturated fat is in that product. And it's just a really important way for us all to try and keep ourselves more healthy.
Yeah, and some things that we do put in our mouth that they're saying here in the chat, we like toothpaste or soap. We don't have. Well, I feel like I see labels on the soap, but with toothpaste, do you get ingredients, and how do you know that this stuff is safe?
Mm-hmm. So with toothpaste, a lot of them are actually regulated as drugs because sodium fluoride is considered an active ingredient. And that's, of course, the anti-cavity active ingredient that's found in most toothpastes. With drugs, that the sodium fluoride would have been subjected to, numerous studies. And the levels at which it's found in toothpaste have been proven to be safe and effective. And that's kind of the baseline requirement for any active ingredient that's in an over-the-counter drug. The inactive ingredients, though, again, that's sort of left to the manufacturer to make a determination, and there isn't any list of ingredients where FDA has said this is definitely okay as an inactive ingredient, this is definitely not. The only exception is with color additives. But for the rest of it, you're having to rely on the manufacturer's assertion that the product is safe. Now, with the color additives, of course, you may remember the red dye number 3 was banned finally, a couple of months ago. And so that had a pretty big impact. Also important to note that was pressed by not FDA, but I think it was the Center for Science and the Public Interest that pushed FDA based on some studies that showed that it could cause cancer in animals to go ahead and revoke the authorization. So that in and of itself, I think, is a really good way for people to understand that we do have a voice. And FDA is required to listen to us. And so if you stay on top of what FDA is proposing in terms of rules and regulations and things, they're required to do what's called notice and commentary, where they notify us, and then we are allowed to comment. So I think a savvy citizenship, a savvy group of citizens can actually have direct impact. And we should always keep that in mind, that we're not totally helpless in all of this. We can make our voices heard if we have concerns about certain ingredients or certain products in the marketplace.
Can some of these laws and regulations be rolled back? I mean, the ban of red dye number 3, for example, the 2022 Modernization of Cosmetic Regulations Act, the 2011 Food Safety Modernization Act that you mentioned under Obama. Is this something that could be undone the way, we're seeing the agencies themselves being dismantled?
Well, that is going to present its challenges, because even as you press, even in normal times, it can take a long time for these sorts of actions to bear fruit. A lot of the personnel that reviews products and reviews this, ingredients or additives or things, they may be removed. Again, that's kind of part of this whole chaos that we've been talking about. Seeing exactly where is the agency going to end up being limited in terms of their capabilities. But I think we still, make our voices heard, press our, state and federal legislators to, take action as needed. We're seeing a lot of that, people, in the streets, protesting, people going to town halls, people making their voices heard of their unhappiness with what's happening. And I think it's important to keep in mind that we should always do that. And there are a lot of advocacy groups like the Center for Science and the Public Interest that, are there, reaching out to them, I think is helpful, supporting them in their mission to make sure that government hears what we have to say.
Yeah. I always think that's a good idea. There's so many areas that this touches that we don't even think about. Dr. Peter Marks, who was with the FDA, was either pushed out or he was forced to resign. He says he was forced to resign because he wouldn't give the Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, his team, unrestricted access to the vaccine safety database, meaning they would have the ability to write over it or edit it. He said he was worried they would delete it or manipulate it, and as a result, he was pushed out. Our health secretary at the moment being a longtime anti-vaxxer. We have had this weekend the second measles-related death of late of an unvaccinated kid, and I'm wondering what this trend line looks like for the implementation of vaccines in this country, and also the pipeline of new, vaccinations that are coming on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, my expertise is not in the area of biologics and vaccines, so I can really only sort of comment as a consumer, like you.
Right.
That, I sit back and I do watch this veering away from established science, not just with vaccines, but kind of with everything. And, with a bit of alarm, I'm, scientist by trade. And so, I have a firm belief and faith in, established science. And so I think, it should be considered a concern, if changes are made without a solid grounding in scientific fact.
Right. And scientists like yourself seem to be kind of targets of these government cuts that I've seen so far. Scientists, experts, heads of labs, these folks are being laid off. My understanding is that some other countries are recruiting y'all. So if that genie comes out of the bottle, can it go back in?
That's a really good question. I'm hopeful. It's hard to predict, what happens over the course of the next few years. I've a niece that's in a PhD program for, wanting to go into this kind of work. And, I'm hopeful that it is science and, the important enhancements and, discoveries that are being made, that will continue. But, unfortunately, I don't have a good sense of where all that might end up.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that would be asking you to be psychic. But,
Yeah.
RFK didn't.
Yeah, no crystal ball over here.
No, I don't have one
I wish
either.
I had one.
All I got is common sense, and I only have that 75% of the time. But, but it is true. Our health secretary has announced some big cutbacks at the federal health agencies. That includes the FDA, and that does appear to include a lot of scientists, not just administrators or people we would think of as sort of, bureaucratic extra, but actually starting in February, the FDA started laying off whole teams of scientists that work on robots, that work on insulin, that work on food safety. So after news, traffic, and sports, which we're going into right now, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Anna Benevente, about how we keep ourselves and our families safe during a changing regulatory environment for food and drugs. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. The Supreme Court indefinitely blocked the deadline for Kilmar Abrego Garcia's return to the U.S., citing his custody in El Salvador despite an administrative error in his deportation. Chief Justice John Roberts issued the order. After backlash, the National Parks Service restored Harriet Tubman's photo and quote on the Underground Railroad webpage, reversing changes made without top leadership's approval. Israel plans to move trade barriers with the U.S. as President Trump's tariffs take effect, announced by Prime Minister Netanyahu during his visit to the White House. Both leaders highlighted their strong alliance and desire for close trade relations. And television and sports personality Stephen A. Smith says he's leaving the door open in regards to a presidential bid. Smith said in a post on his X profile that life was great and he hates the thought of being a politician, but he's sick of this mess. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Right now, there are young people across the world facing a tough choice: continue their dream of education or drop out to help their family put food on the table. You can help change their future in a single moment. See how far your support can go at unbound.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Dodgers have lost 3 of their last 4 games after losing to the Washington Nationals 6-4 Monday night. Monday morning, when the Dodgers visited the White House to be honored by President Trump for winning the World Series last season, all the players and staff wore a suit and tie. Somebody should have made the suggestion that everybody in the Dodgers group wear a number 42 Jackie Robinson jersey to the ceremony. That would have been a huge statement and a message to Trump that the Dodgers organization firmly stands behind Major League Baseball's first black player. Under orders from Trump, the U.S. Defense Department 2 weeks ago removed a story from its website about Robinson's military service before he signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. Enormous criticism of the move forced the Defense Department to put Robinson's story back on their website. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
At Providence, health equity is the foundation of our community health initiatives, ensuring care reaches those who need it most. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in America. African Americans face a higher risk of life-threatening issues like hypertension, the number 1 cause of stroke. 55% of Black adults have high blood pressure. The good news is 80% of heart disease is preventable with healthy lifestyle changes and patient-centered care provided by the Providence Heart and Vascular Institute. From routine screenings to advanced procedures, Providence provides comprehensive care for the heart conditions that overly impact our community by ensuring patients receive treatments tailored to their needs. Let's stop the trend of being 30% more likely to die from heart-related problems. Take charge of your heart health with world-class cardiologists who deliver the compassionate care you deserve. Visit providence.org/SoCalHeart. That's providence.org/SoCalHeart to request an appointment.
Hi, I'm Dominique DiPrima, and it's almost time to celebrate KBLA's 4th anniversary, coming up Juneteenth 2025. we'll be marking the achievement with 4 key community events, including a special symposium, luncheon, and brain trust hosted by me entitled The State of Black Women in Los Angeles. Keep it locked here for details on how to join us for this groundbreaking symposium examining the unique challenges, triumphs, and contributions of Black women in Los Angeles in the areas of education, healthcare, community leadership, cultural and political contributions. This public convocation will provide a critical forum to address the specific social, economic, and political realities facing Black women in LA today. We'll go live with a radio broadcast and YouTube live stream, a public discussion, and a private dialogue with some of LA's most impactful women. It's an affirmation of Black women standing at the intersection of race and gender in times of adversity while demonstrating remarkable resilience and leadership. We will listen and we will speak out and be heard, all in service of finding opportunities and solutions. Please plan to join us in celebrating our 4th anniversary by amplifying the voices of Black women. For more on our symposium and 4 events celebrating 4 years on the air, simply stay tuned or keep an eye on KBLA1580.com and help make this Juneteenth more jubilant with all of us at KBLA Talk 1580.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes, indeed. A scientist is in the discussion right now. Anna Benevente is a senior regulatory specialist, director of product labeling and ingredient review for Registrar Corp, which helps people, companies in various areas, food, cosmetics, etc., get in compliance with the rules of the FDA. He's got a Bachelor of Science from William and Mary College, spent over 15 years of analytical research experience. Got so many questions. We're going to try to get to those. Let's say things that we see on labels that I don't know if they mean anything. Things like natural, healthy. Should we just be ignoring those?
Not necessarily. So, there are actually quite a few regulations that dictate when a product can make a particular claim. The claim that a product is healthy actually was rewritten at the tail end of last year. And it used to be that in order to make that claim, as long as you didn't have fat and cholesterol and one single vitamin that was at least 10% of your daily recommended amount, then you could just make that claim. They've changed it now. It's not in effect yet. Companies have a few years to get into compliance with it, but it represents a shift towards looking at dietary patterns as a whole. And so for the craziest thing is that it used to be that a bottle of water could not claim to be healthy, even though we all know that it's much healthier to drink that, even in some of these vitamin-infused waters and things that have artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners. Like that product could make the healthy claim, but bottled water could not.
Wow.
The new rules, it's crazy, right? And so the new rule actually focuses on kind of what our health teacher back in elementary school told us to do. It focuses on whole groups of foods like healthy grains and vegetables and, oils that are low in saturated fat. And so it's going to change the way that we look at that claim and the types of foods that we consider to be healthy. So like under the old rules, even salmon or, healthy but fatty fish couldn't make the claim. Now they can. So I encourage consumers to look at those claims, especially as the new rule comes into place. The front of package labeling, talking about earlier, when that becomes a requirement, hopefully that's going to give consumers a really easy way to identify foods that aren't as unhealthy for us. There are certain levels that you have to meet in order to make claims like if a product's high in vitamin A or if it's low fat. All that information I think is good and helpful, and there are rules for it. Now, some claims, like natural, actually isn't defined in regulation. So FDA has sort of a policy about, well, if you don't have preservatives and color additives and artificial flavors, then you're cool to make that claim. But there's nothing really on the books, like in a regulation. So natural is kind of iffy. But a lot of those other types of claims, like high in potassium, there are regulations that dictate when you can claim that. And so consumers can feel pretty confident about those types of claims. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to let you land.
I was going to say, if you want to veer off in a completely different tangent, though, dietary supplements, the claims that are made in dietary supplements, those are the ones that can be more questionable because if it's making a claim about, supporting memory or, good for your eyesight or, any claim where it affects the structure or function of the body, those claims aren't written into regulation. The manufacturer is supposed to have data to substantiate it, but they're not required to submit it to FDA. So if you're going to raise an eyebrow at any claim on a product label, probably the dietary supplement labels would be the most important. And you would want to kind of independently maybe verify, is there some truth to this claim or not? Yeah.
When we talk about, speaking of salmon, when we talk about product labeling, many people would like to avoid GMOs, genetically modified foods, or Franken meats, like cloned meats and salmons and that kind of thing. Is there a way to do that through labeling?
At this point, the only GMO labeling actually is from the USDA, and it's the bioengineered food disclosure requirement. I do believe that the aquaculture salmon is on the list of foods that have to disclose that it's bioengineered. The regulation also states that if you have active knowledge that you're using a bioengineered ingredient, then you have to disclose it, even if it's not on the list of foods that USDA generally considers to be bioengineered. So you'll have to look at a label carefully, though, because if I remember correctly, it can just be off on the side over by the ingredients and where, the nutrition chart and the ingredients and the manufacturer are listed. You may find either a symbol that says bioengineered or a statement that it contains a bioengineered ingredient. So if that's a concern, if you as a consumer are concerned about that, then that's where you're going to find that information. And that rule is on the books. So in theory, all the foods now where they have an active knowledge that there is a GMO ingredient, it should be on the label.
What do you think about some of these websites, apps, I should say, like Cosmetics, Skin Safe, and Think Dirty, that claim to tell you which cosmetic products have toxic ingredients and which ones are safe to use?
I don't have a lot of familiarity with those. I have seen, online certain websites that will try and evaluate the safety of certain ingredients. The tricky part is knowing whether or not a certain ingredient is unsafe at the level at which it's in that particular product. So, you could have an ingredient where, at high levels, it's not safe to, be put on your skin or put in your body, but at, very low levels, there's no concern. So that's the tricky part with those. Again, I don't have too much familiarity with them, but that's kind of the first thing that occurs to me when I look at those, So, again, it's, I think, incumbent on all of us to kind of do our homework and, not to take something at face value, but really kind of suss out, is this really a concern? And, should I, avoid using a certain product because of, a statement like that being made on one of these websites or apps?
How would you, in today's environment, it really is uncertain. We're reading about these layoffs, and then next thing you know, a judge says you got to give these people back their jobs. We don't know if they want their jobs back or if they can find the people. I mean, there's just a lot of X factors. What would you do at this point to keep, your family's personal food supply safe?
Well, so I pay very close attention to what FDA puts out. And again, this might be impacted by all these layoffs. I pray not. But they send out daily consumer alerts, and I keep track just for myself and my family, like what kind of recalls are happening. They'll issue if there's, salmonella in a certain type of product that's been found, or undeclared allergens if you're, a consumer where you have a food allergy. That type of information comes out of FDA daily. And so consumers can sign up for those alerts, which is one of the things that I do. I, again, try and go back to my health teacher in elementary school. I try and avoid processed foods. I try and purchase, fresh produce, wash it well, try and eat in a clean way. There's definitely a clean label movement going on right now. And for consumers who are concerned about additives and things like that, FDA can legislate all it wants, but brands respond to consumer demand. And so that's kind of another area of power that we have, where if we decide, we're only going to purchase products that, don't have all those extra additives or colors or artificial sweeteners, companies respond to that. Their bottom line is their most important thing. So if consumer demand can shift towards, kind of safer alternatives, then that's another way that we can personally impact just, the safety and the nature of our food supply as a whole, as a country.
Anna Benevente is my guest, and we will continue this conversation when we come forward, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
After producing an award-winning climate justice campaign in 2024, KBLA Talk 1580 has gone all in on its 2025 Climate Justice plus Black Health Initiative. April is Minority Health Month, and Urban Family Focus, in partnership with Providence Health Systems, presents The Heart of the Matter. Providence doctors and health equity officers will participate in informative and life-changing conversations on hypertension, health equity, behavioral health, and community engagement. Don't miss these empowering conversations on Urban Family Focus every Saturday in April at 7 and Sunday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sponsored by Providence, Southern California's largest and most comprehensive health care network. We've got a lot to talk about on KBLA Talk 1580. Download the KBLA 1580 app or log in to KBLA1580.com. I'm Reverend Gerald, the life coach. On KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Worried about eviction? You have rights, and Stay Housed LA can help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between LA County, the City of Los Angeles, and local service providers. From Lancaster to Long Beach, we're here to help you with tenant education workshops, legal clinics, free legal services for eligible tenants, and online resources about tenant protection laws. Don't face eviction alone. Call our hotline at 1-888-694-0040. That's 1-888-694-0040. Or visit stayhousedla.org. Stay Housed LA, keeping Los Angeles residents in their homes. Stay Housed LA, your rights, your home, our community. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Anna Benevente is our guest, and we're talking about, what she does for a living as a Senior Regulatory Specialist, Director of Product Labeling and Ingredient Review at Registrar Corp, which helps people get their act together to pass muster with the FDA. So, bird flu. A lot of folks are freaked out, don't want to eat dairy, don't want to eat beef or chicken, because apparently bird flu also affects cows. As we see the regulatory environment loosen up is this of greater concern, or would you feel safe with what's happening?
So USDA is the one that's in charge of all of the, animal safety issues, things like that for agriculture, which includes, poultry, meat, all of that. So I have some familiarity with that. Not a lot, I'll be honest. But I also have read about cuts to the team that actually oversees those sorts of issues when they come up. My understanding is, unfortunately, it meant culling the herd and, killing off a lot of chickens and everything, which is why prices were spiking so much. My understanding now is that anything that we find in the shelves, hopefully, is okay. But yeah, I don't have a lot. I don't have a lot of information on that, unfortunately. But again, with all of these cuts, I think when you cut key personnel at the agencies that are responsible for ensuring that we have, safe food, that you're going to see impacts. And so I hope that a lot of those key positions are restored and that people are hired back to make sure that you and I are safe and our children's food is safe, that we just buy day to day.
Right. Back to contacting our lawmakers and letting them know that this is an area that we are concerned about. In passing, you mentioned washing your vegetables really well, and with, constantly, I feel like there's something, why you're recalling lettuce? I mean, I understand like dairy or whatever. Lettuce, cauliflower, what? What do you use to wash it thoroughly with? I know some folks use bleach. Some people use vinegar. Is there something? I'm asking a scientist right now. Is there something you wash with?
Maybe I should admit this, but I just use water.
Okay.
I don't know about adding bleach. If anybody's out there adding bleach, please make sure that you're rinsing it really, really carefully after that. Organic, it's so much more expensive, but, with organic fruits and vegetables, there are some where I will pay for organic. I know if you go online, you can find, lists of fruits and vegetables that may have higher levels of pesticide contamination, because for me, that's the big concern is, pesticide contamination. And so you can find lists of fruits and vegetables that are more apt to have those higher levels. And maybe, if you have to pick and choose based on your budget, which I certainly do, I will tend to buy maybe organic because they're not using all those pesticides on those particular products, those fruits and vegetables that are more prone to having those types of levels. With the salmonella and E. coli and things like that, and those recalls that happen periodically, staying on top of the recalls that FDA issues. One of the nice things about FSMA, the law that came out in 2011, is that it gave FDA mandatory recall authority, which it did not have before. So now they can basically force a company to recall products that are unsafe. So staying on top of that sort of thing, either in the news or through FDA constituent updates, is a really good way to try and keep your family safe. Yeah,
common sense stuff, but stuff we don't think about. It's amazing how much we ship stuff around the globe. Meats and vegetables and all kinds of things are being traded in and out of the U.S. What about like imported foods? They don't have the same rules that we do, but when they bring them in here, they're forced to comply with our rules, I would imagine.
Yes. And, Obama's FSMA was just groundbreaking in so many ways. And one of the ways that it really overhauled the food safety system here is that it made importers responsible for monitoring their foreign suppliers. And it's called FSVP, the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And it's one of the big changes, and one of the larger services that we actually offer to companies is helping them be in compliance with that, because what they have to do is they have to monitor their supplier and gather their food safety, like every manufacturing facility should have a food safety plan. And that plan has to address certain key points under the law, and it has to be equivalent to what our domestic companies have to comply with. So if you're importing food into the U.S., you are required now to make sure that your supplier is in compliance with the food safety rules. So, imported food, we can feel pretty confident that it's going to be in compliance with FDA's requirements for domestic companies too.
Marcus asked, is bird flu only in America? No, bird flu is an international problem. And even if it was only here because of the way we import and export stuff around the world, one of the things they're fighting over right now with the tariffs is who gets to import beef and how much of a tariff will be on it. It's interesting you say if you have to choose because of your budget, because it's true. It seems that healthy eating is more expensive. I try to buy organic. How much does buying local help? The sort of just go to a farmer's market and skip all of the all of the shipping and handling of our food.
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent point, because if you do buy local, not only are you supporting, local, lots of times small businesses, but, the inherent hazards that a food might encounter in transit, over, 5,000 miles, if it's coming just right up the street, it's not going to encounter, the same, potential hazards, that just come from transport and from time, So that's actually a great way to try and increase the safety of the food that's on your dinner table. Buying local is always a good thing. Supporting small business is always a good thing. So that's a great way to do that.
I mean, I think I try to walk a line on this show because I don't want to just freak people out for no reason and be an alarmist. I feel like one of the epidemics that we're dealing with right now is the epidemic of fear, where we're just scared about everything because things are moving so fast. At the same time, I feel like it's important for us to understand the objective conditions on the ground and what we're actually dealing with so that we can make wise choices. Are there websites, publications, apps, things that you turn to as resources around, just keeping yourself, your family, your friends safe, or just informed even, that we should know about, that you could share with us?
Well, I have the blessing of looking at FDA's website every single day that I'm working. So, and, signing up for all of their alerts and everything. So I'm able to stay on top of it that way. And I think that the news organizations do a really good job of alerting people when things like, E. coli in lettuce has cropped up, sorry, bad pun. But, things like that, just staying informed, watching the news, watching what FDA publishes, or USDA, is important, for us all to stay aware. And we all get distracted by, day-to-day life and day-to-day pressures. But that's a good way to make sure that you can keep your family safe, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about pesticides, I think that's probably one of my number one concerns in everything from food to cannabis to all, cosmetics, to all the places they may crop up. Sort of the Roundup example of having something very, very toxic, which has been very widely used, and how we protect ourselves. It sounds like wash everything triple times and, and be mindful.
Yep, exactly. That is just the best thing that you can do. And again, I mean, to your point about not trying to be alarmists, the food safety system in the U.S. is among the best in the world, and, when we're watching the news, you see, oh my gosh, a recall. Oh no, we are a nation of 350 million people. Like, a recall is going to happen here and there. People should still feel confident. And I'm so glad you said that about not trying to be alarmists. People should still feel confident in the foods that we buy at the grocery store, at our farmers markets. Food safety is an important measure here. And again, we're at the top of the world. In the tops of the world when it comes to the quality of our food safety systems here. So people shouldn't feel overly concerned and that sort of thing.
Right. And if we push back and talk to our lawmakers and local and national and vote with our dollars, we can we can make sure that it stays one of the most safe food supplies in the nation.
Absolutely.
Anna Benevente, is there a social media site or website you like to give us where we can follow your work?
Well, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. If you also go to our company website, is registrarcorp.com. We issue a lot of blogs. We do webinars about food safety and labeling and cosmetics and all of the changes that are happening. So people are welcome to go there and see what we have to say. A lot of great information found there as well.
I appreciate the conversation and your transparency.
Well, I appreciate so much for the invitation. It's been such a pleasure talking to you this morning.
Indeed, it has. Tavis Smiley's up next. He's fully loaded. Great show on deck. And so definitely want to stick around for that. We have an incredible lineup actually around here all day long. Don't forget, if you missed any of our conversations, including this complete conversation with Anna Benevente, you can get them for free wherever you get your podcasts. Like my mama used to say, history is now, and we are making it together. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with